The howls weren't from 100 nor 200. They were from 1,000, echoing like hammer blows against my frozen chest. Anya, the Yakut widow, felt the icy air of 71 Klaisi burn her lungs as the wolf pack, hungry eyes gleaming in the polar darkness, surrounded her village's last refuge. The scent of blood and the promise of death hung in the air, while the biting wind lashed her face, reminding her of the loss that had brought her there. With her heart pounding erratically, she clutched her ancestral staff, knowing that everyone's life depended on a decision. And what she would do next would defy the very logic of survival. Anya felt the cold burn her nostrils, but an intense flame blazed in her chest. It wasn't despair, but iron resolve. Boris, her husband, always said that fear was a treacherous counselor, but courage was born of responsibility, and the responsibility for her village's life, for the restless children, for the trembling elders, weighed on her like Yakutia's snow mantle. She tightened her grip on the staff. The smooth, cold wood extended her will. The howls intensified, a macabre symphony promising the end. The pack of 1,000 wolves, a dark, hungry stain against the infinite white, seemed like a nightmare materialized. Their eyes, small, bright points in the darkness, were like ill-omened shooting stars, encircling the reindeer herd, the soul of the village. The reindeer, huddled and trembling, emitted sounds of panic, a lament that pierced Anya's heart. She smelled the pungent scent of the wolves, a mix of savagery and hunger that made her stomach churn. "There's nothing we can do, Anya." "It's the end," whispered Dima, a young hunter, his voice choked. His shoulders slumped, eyes once full of youthful fire, now reflected only the polar darkness. Others nodded in silence, their faces marked by resignation. Despair was a poison, spreading faster than the cold. But Anya couldn't accept it. The image of Boris, his warm smile and the gentle strength of his hands, flooded her mind. He had taught her to read tracks in the snow, to feel the change in the wind, to understand the silent language of the taiga. He had taught her that life always finds a way, even in the harshest of winters. And now, she needed to honor that lesson, to be the strength Boris had always known her to be. Her gaze swept across the frozen plain, searching for something beyond the obvious. The wolves were many, yes, but creatures of instinct, not reason. Anya carried in her veins the blood of generations of Yakuts who had survived even crueler winters, who had danced with death and emerged victorious. She didn't have the brute strength of men, but she possessed something more valuable: cunning, patience, and ancestral wisdom woven into every fiber of her being. She took a deep breath, the air freezing in her lungs, and a crystal-clear decision formed. It wouldn't be a fight of strength, but of intelligence, not a direct confrontation, but a dangerous dance with the wild. Her lips tightened into a thin line, and her eyes, once tearful with grief, now shone with a cold yet burning determination. She turned to Dima, her voice surprisingly firm. "It's not the end, Dima. It's just the beginning of a new story." With a decisive movement, Anya stepped away from the tent, heading towards the darkness that swallowed the village. Her steps were slow and firm, a challenge against the merciless vastness and the imminent threat. She knew she was walking into the unknown, into the heart of the storm, but the memory of Boris and the love for her people were her shield and her sword. The villagers watched, paralyzed, as Anya's small figure became a silhouette against the darkness, swallowed by the polar night and the incessant howls. A faint hope, fragile as a snowflake, bloomed in their hearts. They didn't know what she would do, but they knew that Anya, Boris's widow, never gave up. She was the last spark of light in a world of darkness. Anya felt the ice crunch under her reindeer hide boots, each step a silent prayer in the merciless vastness. The air, so dense it seemed to cut her from within, froze her eyelids, but she refused to blink. Her eyes, accustomed to the darkness of the polar night, searched for patterns, weaknesses, any sign in the dark, howling mass that was the pack. The 1,000 wolves, once a distant blur, now seemed like a sea of hungry shadows, their eyes gleaming like dying embers in the gloom. Their scent, strong and wild, mingled with the frozen breath of the night, a constant reminder of the danger surrounding her. The staff in her hands was more than wood. It was an extension of her will, a link to the earth and to Boris. He had taught her to listen to the tiger's silence, to decipher the message of the wind whispering among the frozen pines. "Anya," he would say, his voice deep and soft, "nature has its own language. If you know how to listen, it will always give you a clue." And now, she needed to listen with every fiber of her being. She moved with calculated slowness, almost like a shadow circling the edge of the wolf pack. There was no hurry, just a patience forged by countless winters. She observed the pack's formation, the way they moved, the silent hierarchy that manifested in every growl and every glance. There was something different about this horde, a desperate ferocity that transcended common hunting. The extreme cold had pushed them to their limit, and they were willing to do anything. Back in the village, Dima clenched his fists, his knuckles white. His eyes, fixed on Anya's silhouette, diminishing in the darkness, were filled with a mix of admiration and dread. "She's mad," whispered an elder woman trembling beneath the furs. "No woman, no man can face 1,000 wolves." But in her eyes and in those of others, there was also a spark of hope, a stubbornness that refused to die. Anya, Boris's widow, always found a way. Anya, ignoring the cold biting at her bones, focused on the pack leader. He was colossal, larger than any wolf she had ever seen, with a silver-grey coat that seemed to absorb the scant light. His eyes, even from a distance, seemed to emit a peculiar glow, like diamonds embedded in the darkness. He moved with unquestionable authority, his low growls keeping the horde in order, directing the encirclement of the reindeer. She needed to understand that wolf, to enter its wild mind. Boris's memory returned, not as pain, but as strength. He had taught her that brute force was for fools. True strength lay in the mind, in the ability to foresee, to adapt, to use the environment to one's advantage. Anya remembered how he had once diverted a hungry bear from his trap, using only the sound of the wind and the scent of smoke. It wasn't about fighting, but about deceiving, about guiding. She paused, the icy wind lashing her face. She looked up at the sky. Far on the horizon, a greenish, ghostly light began to dance. The northern lights, a sign from the spirits perhaps, or just the indifferent beauty of the universe. For Anya, it was a reminder that, even in the deepest darkness, light always found a way, and she, Boris's widow, would be that light. With a renewed breath, she moved again, her eyes fixed on the pack leader, a bold idea beginning to form in her mind. Anya moved with a hunter's lightness and precision, her eyes fixed on the pack leader, the axis of their fury. Her steps were inaudible on the snow, a silent dance with danger. Her idea was audacious, their only chance. Boris always said, "At the edge of the abyss, weave a new path." He would divert rivers with a mere branch. It wasn't strength, but an understanding of nature. She observed the diamond-eyed leader. He kept his distance from the herd, letting the younger wolves form the encirclement. He was the mind and strategy of the pack. Anya noticed flaws, points of tension in the hills to the east. That's where she needed to act. Her breath formed clouds of vapor. The cold was an ally. Snow and ice were malleable. Wolves had an instinct for self-preservation. They would avoid risks if an alternative existed. The key was to create that illusion, to direct their hunger away from the herd towards a more difficult hunt. Back in the village, Dima didn't avert his gaze. Anya's figure was their only hope. The northern lights danced. The elder woman, by the fire, murmured prayers, her eyes tearful. May the ancestors guide her. she whispered. "May Boris's strength be with her." Anya continued her silent journey. She approached the hills, where the wind howled. The terrain was treacherous, with crevices and rocks, a perfect labyrinth for her strategy. She began to collect stones and dry branches carefully. Her plan wasn't confrontation, but manipulation of the environment and the wolves' instincts. She would use the wind. Boris had taught that nature revealed its secrets to those with patience. Anya understood. She felt the pulse of the earth and the silent presence of the ancestors. With gloved hands, she arranged branches and stones, creating obstacles. They weren't traps, but suggestions of an easier path. Hunger was powerful, and this she would exploit. The scent of the reindeer was strong, but an opportunity could be more tempting. The pack leader raised his head, sniffing. His eyes turned to Anya, now closer. A growl reverberated. Nearby wolves stirred hungry gazes. Anya didn't retreat. It was the crucial moment, a test of courage and cunning. She needed to show the leader that she wasn't prey, but a force to be reckoned with. With a final adjustment, she turned, not to flee, but to invite and direct the wolves. Anya turned, a slender silhouette against the northern lights, which now painted the sky green and violet. Her eyes met those of the pack leader. There was no fear, only a defiant calm that irritated the colossal wolf. He growled, a deep sound in the frozen air, and took a step forward, muscles tense. It was a test. Anya needed to maintain her composure. Without sudden movements, she pointed her staff towards the rocky crevice she had prepared. The wind, her ally, blew strong, carrying the scent of dried meat she had scattered, a lure. It wouldn't feed 1,000 wolves, but it was enough to pique the leader's curiosity, suggesting an easier and less risky hunt than the herd. In the village, Dima watched with his heart in his throat. He saw Anya, fragile against the night, standing before the beast. The villagers huddled together, the warmth of their bodies a fragile defense. The elder woman, wrinkled hands covering her mouth, eyes wide. "She speaks to him," she whispered, almost inaudibly, "to the spirit of the forest." Anya felt a silent communication. The leader tilted his head, sniffing. His diamond eyes weighed the new information. Younger wolves stirred, howling in frustration. Hunger made them reckless, but the leader was reason, experience. She took another slow step back, drawing the wolf's gaze to the crevice. The northern lights bathed the scene in a supernatural glow, transforming the ice into shimmering crystals. The sky witnessed the duel of intelligences. Anya knew the leader was torn between easy prey and a smaller, but less dangerous and more immediate hunt. Boris's memory, his patience overcoming strength, was her guide. He said that nature, wild, followed patterns. Hunger, when faced with an alternative, chose the path of least resistance. She needed to reinforce that alternative, make it irresistible. With an imperceptible movement, Anya released a fur pouch she carried, letting it drop near the crevice entrance. Inside, more dried meat. The scent spread, strong, mingling with the wind and snow, a necessary sacrifice to save the herd. The pack leader took another step, this time towards the crevice, his head low, sniffing intensely. The other wolves, sensing the change in the alpha's attention, began to move, their growls turning into murmurs of expectation. Hunger was overcoming the siege strategy. Anya felt a shiver, not from cold, but from tension. She had planted the seed of doubt, cultivating it. The pack leader, with keen intelligence, weighed risk and reward. He knew that a direct confrontation with the village, even with 1,000 wolves, would bring losses. The village was protected. The men, though outnumbered, were fearless in defending their families. Her eyes met the wolf's. For an instant, Anya felt a connection. Two wild minds understanding each other. She wasn't begging. She was offering a choice, an honorable way out. The wolf, with a final growl of decision, turned and plunged into the crevice, followed by the nearest ones. The horde, like a diverted river, flowed into the new path, their howls now of excitement. The northern lights danced intensely, a silent celebration. She had succeeded. Not with strength, but with Boris's wisdom and the love for her people. The village was saved. Anya felt the weight of relief crush her, stronger than the cold that numbed her limbs. The silence that followed the horde's departure was almost deafening, broken only by the whisper of the wind and the distant faint howl of the wolves searching for the dried meat. Her legs gave way and she knelt in the soft snow, the staff falling from her exhausted hands. Her body trembled uncontrollably, not just from the cold, but from the adrenaline that finally abandoned her, leaving a painful void. The northern lights still danced in the sky, but to Anya, their beauty seemed like a veil over the brutal reality she had just faced. In the village, panic dissipated, replaced by stunned disbelief. Dima was the first to move, his eyes fixed on Anya's bowed figure. She did it. His voice was a thread, but the hope it carried was palpable. The other villagers, still hesitant, emerged from their tents, faces illuminated by the ghostly light of the aurora. The elder woman, who had previously murmured prayers, now had tears of gratitude streaming down her wrinkles. "The spirits of our ancestors guided her," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. Dima ran through the snow, heavy steps breaking the newly settled silence. He reached Anya, still kneeling, her head bowed. "Anya, you saved us." He knelt beside her, reaching out to touch her, then hesitated, as if she were made of crystal. The widow raised her face, and Dima saw her eyes, once full of icy determination, now brimming with deep pain and overwhelming exhaustion. "Boris." The word escaped her lips like a frozen breath, laden with everything she felt. She had fulfilled her promise, honored his memory, but his absence was an abyss that no victory could fill. Tears, long held back, rolled down her icy cheeks, transforming into small pearls of ice. Dima, not knowing what to say, simply embraced her, an awkward gesture but full of respect and admiration. He felt the tremor in her body, the fragility behind the monumental courage she had just displayed. The other villagers approached, forming a silent circle around Anya and Dima. No one dared to speak loudly, but the gazes, the outstretched hands, the murmurs of gratitude were more eloquent than speeches. They saw not only the woman who had saved them, but the widow who, with a broken heart, had found strength that transcended the human. The connection between them was palpable, an invisible web of love and respect that strengthened in adversity. Anya felt the warmth of nearby bodies, the weight of expectations and sincere gratitude. She rose with difficulty, leaning on Dima. Her eyes swept over their faces one by one, and she saw in them no longer despair, but new hope, a rebirth. The village was saved, the herd intact. The winter would still be long and cruel, but they had survived the unthinkable. She had proven to herself, to Boris, and to everyone that even in the deepest darkness, the light of resilience could shine. The walk back to the village was slow but different. Anya was no longer the grieving widow but the guardian, the heroine. With each step, she felt the weight of her new responsibility, but also a strange lightness in her heart. The pain of Boris's loss was still there, an open wound, but now there was also the certainty that his legacy lived within her, in every beat of her heart, in every fiber of her unwavering courage. The northern lights faded, but the light Anya had kindled in the village would remain, warming them against Yakutia's relentless cold. Upon reaching the first tents, the air was charged with a silent and profound gratitude. The children, awakened by the commotion, peeked out curiously, their eyes wide with admiration. Dima, his face still pale but his eyes shining with renewed respect, helped Anya into her tent, where the fire crackled faintly. The elder woman, sitting near the entrance, reached out her wrinkled hand and touched Anya's arm. "You brought the light back, my daughter," she whispered, and in her tone was a reverence Anya had never expected. The warmth of their gazes and touches was a balm for her frozen bones, but not for the wound in her heart. The northern lights finally dissolved into a pale grey, announcing the arrival of a new day, cold and relentless like all the others. The sun, a distant, heatless disk, barely managed to break through the icy mist. Anya sat in silence, watching the flames dance. The exhaustion was overwhelming, and with it, the pain of Boris returned. Sharper now that the adrenaline of the fight was gone. She had saved everyone, but who would save her from her own loneliness? No sooner had day broken than the villagers began to seek her out, not just to thank her, but to seek advice. "Anya, the river ice is thinner than usual on the hunting trail," said a hunter, his voice full of concern. "What should we do?" Soon after, a young mother approached, her eyes tearful. "My daughter has a cough that won't go away, Anya. You know about herbs, don't you?" And so, one after another they came, bringing their fears, their doubts, their hopes. At first, Anya felt a warmth in being useful, in feeling that Boris would be proud. But as the hours passed, the weight of these expectations began to crush her. She had been the silent widow, the observer. Now she was the leader, the wise woman, the healer, the protector. Every question was a burden, every look of hope a responsibility that seemed greater than winter itself. She found herself searching for answers she didn't have, feeling inadequate, an imposter. Her eyes fixed on the small campfire, and she felt a knot in her throat. Where was the lightness she had felt on the way back? She had faced 1,000 wolves, but now felt lost before the trust of her own people. That was the true test, the unexpected challenge, not the fury of nature, but the weight of leadership, the unwavering expectation they placed upon her. Anya, the savior, felt more alone than ever, her heart heavy with pain and the new, overwhelming responsibility. She wondered, did Boris prepare me for this too? Winter, she realized, was just beginning. Winter, she realized, was just beginning. No sooner had the pale sun risen over the icy horizon than Anya's tent had already become a point of pilgrimage. The voices, once whispers of panic, were now murmurs of hope, but also of demand. "Anya, the wood is running out, and the snow is too deep for the elders," said a man, his shoulders hunched with cold and worry. "Where should we look?" His eyes, once full of despair, now fixed on her with unwavering faith. Anya listened, her head throbbing, feeling the weight of every word. She tried to recall Boris's teachings, his calm voice explaining the best places to find dry wood, the least dangerous trails. But his memory, once an anchor, now seemed a distant, almost mocking echo of a time when responsibilities were shared, not borne alone. She indicated a direction, a hesitant gesture, and the man nodded, leaving with a confidence Anya did not feel. Later, a young mother, her face marked by deprivation, brought her small child, whose lips were purple with cold. "He won't stop crying, Anya. What should I do? You are the wisest among us." Anya touched the child's feverish forehead, her heart heavy. She remembered Boris, how he had taught her to recognize healing herbs, but the certainty he possessed seemed to have evaporated with his departure. She felt like an imposter, an empty shell trying to fill a role that wasn't hers. Her fingers trembled slightly as she prepared an herbal tea, the mother's eyes fixed on her, full of an expectation that suffocated her. As the day dragged on, the demands did not lessen. Disputes over the division of furs, doubts about the best way to protect the remaining reindeer, advice on how to maintain the village's morale. Every question was an arrow piercing her already exhausted spirit. Anya, who had always found solace in the solitude of the taiga, now found herself at the center of all attention, and the isolation she felt was paradoxically deeper than ever. She yearned for a moment of silence, For an instant, when she could just be Anya, the widow, and not the savior, the leader, the healer. Dima, observing her from afar, noticed the paleness in her face, the way her shoulders slumped a little more with each new consultation. He approached, hesitant, as Anya finished sewing a torn fur boot, her fingers agile, yet slow. "Anya," he began, his voice soft, "you don't have to carry everything alone, Boris." He wouldn't have wanted that. Anya raised her eyes, and Dima saw in them a mixture of gratitude and a pain so profound it made him recoil. "He prepared me for the fight, Dima," she whispered, her voice hoarse, "but not for the weight of being everyone's hope." Dima sat beside her in silence and began mending a fishing net, a simple gesture of solidarity. The elder woman, who had been observing the scene, approached and placed a wrinkled hand on Anya's shoulder. "Strength isn't in having all the answers, my daughter," she said, her eyes wise and gentle. "It's in knowing how to ask for help, in sharing the burden." Boris knew that. Anya looked at the elder woman's wrinkled hands, then at Dima, who worked in silence. For the first time since the wolves' departure, a small crack of light opened in her heart. She wasn't alone. The burden was still heavy, but perhaps, just perhaps, she didn't have to carry it entirely alone. Winter was long, but human connection, she realized, was the most potent warmth against the cold. The small crack of light in Anya's heart expanded. The elder woman, with her gentle gaze, had planted a seed of wisdom. Dima, beside her, offered a silent balm. Anya felt a warmth in her soul, different from fire. She didn't need to be Boris, nor to have all the answers. She needed to be Anya and to trust her people, just as they trusted her. The next morning the pale sun barely broke the horizon, but Anya's tent was already different. There wasn't the same anxious queue, but a more organized, collaborative movement. Dima, on his own initiative, organized the hunters to check the river trail, following Anya's general directions, but with freedom to adapt. He approached her as she prepared herbal tea for the sick child. "Anya," he said, "the men and I will check the ice. If it's thin, we'll look for another route for the wood. You taught us to observe, remember." The faint smile appeared on Anya's lips. It was the first genuine relief in days. The elder woman, in turn, sat with the young mother and child, offering Anya's tea and her own healing songs and ancient stories. She explained to the mother the importance of warmth and rest, something Anya, exhausted, might have forgotten. The tent, once a center of demands, was now a place of sharing. Anya watched, feeling new energy. She stood up and, instead of isolating herself, went to the group of women sewing furs. "We need more needles," she said, her voice firmer, "and the hide from the last moose. We'll use it to reinforce the hunter's boots. Dima and the others will need it." The women nodded, their gazes full of renewed respect and camaraderie. They didn't expect Anya to do everything, but to guide them, to inspire them. The afternoon brought a biting wind, but the village seemed warmer due to the collaboration. Dima and the hunters returned, exhausted, but with news. "The ice is dangerous, Anya," Dima reported, his eyes fixed on hers. "But we found a clearing with fallen trees, closer than we expected. It's not much, but it will buy us time." Anya nodded, a knot in her throat loosening. They had found a solution together. That night, around the communal fire, Boris's stories were told again, but with the strength of his legacy, not the sadness of grief. Anya, sitting between the elder woman and Dima, listened to the voices of her people. She was no longer the solitary widow, nor the overburdened leader. She was part of something larger, a link in the chain of the community. Winter was still a threat, but the village, united, seemed stronger, more prepared. Human connection, she realized, was not just warmth against the cold. It was the very flame of life, burning brightly in Yakutia's darkness. Anya felt the weight of responsibility now shared. and a renewed strength invaded her. She had learned that true leadership wasn't about having all the answers ready, but about inspiring others to find them, to weave together the intricate tapestry of survival. Her eyes, once tearful with pain and exhaustion, now shone with a serene determination and palpable hope. Boris's spirit lived not only in her, but in every member of the village, in every act of courage and altruism that manifested. And in that moment of unity, under Yakutia's starry sky, Anya knew that, together, they would face whatever winter still held for them, with the certainty that life would always find a way. The certainty that life would always find a way, now shared by all, infused a new and vigorous energy into the village. The days that followed the wolves' departure were filled with a fervor of activity. Dima, with Anya's silent approval, took charge of organizing hunting and wood-gathering expeditions. He consulted Anya on the safest routes and nature's signs, but now brought his own suggestions, forged by experience and newly acquired confidence. The women, led by the elder woman, took care of the furs, food preparation and children's education, weaving new stories of courage with Anya at the center, but always emphasizing the collective effort. Anya's tent was no longer a court of pleas, but a place for meeting and planning, where ideas were exchanged and burdens were divided more equitably. She felt lighter, watching the community's gears turn with an efficiency Boris would have applauded, a soft yet genuine smile gracing her lips. However, Yakutia was a relentless master at testing human resilience. As the weeks dragged on and the sun became even more elusive, barely breaking the darkness for a few hours, a new and subtle shadow began to hang over the village. It wasn't the visible threat of wolves, but a deep weariness, a melancholy that slowly seeped into their hearts. The polar night seemed endless, and the days mere slivers of pale, heatless light. The spontaneous laughter of the children diminished, replaced by a heavy and worrying silence. The hunters returned from expeditions with less enthusiasm, and the women, though continuing their chores with the same dedication, did so with more slumped shoulders, their gazes more distant. It was the overwhelming weight of winter, the insidious feeling that the darkness and cold would never end, undermining the hope they had fought so hard to ignite. Anya perceived the signs with painful clarity. The lost gazes, the suppressed sighs, the lack of appetite, the slowness in movements. She herself felt the sting of hopelessness in her own bones, a fatigue that even deep sleep couldn't completely alleviate. One night, as she watched the flickering flames of the communal fire, Dima sat beside her, his face marked by exhaustion and worry. "Anya," he said, his voice low, almost a whisper. "The men are losing their strength. It's not hunger. It's something deeper. Winter is stealing our souls, freezing our joy." The elder woman, listening in silence from the other side of the fire, nodded gravely, her wise eyes fixed on Anya. "It's the sickness of darkness, my daughter. It tries to break us when we are most vulnerable, when the sunlight hides for too long." She looked at Anya, her eyes seeking an answer, a new flame. "You brought hope back, Anya, but hope needs to be constantly fed, or it withers and dies like a flower in the harshest ice." Anya felt a shiver run down her spine. She had overcome paralyzing fear, the overwhelming pain of grief, and the crushing responsibility of leadership. But how to fight against melancholy, against the very essence of winter that seeped into every fiber of being, threatening to freeze not only the body, but also the spirit? It was an invisible enemy, more treacherous and insidious than 1,000 hungry wolves. She remembered Boris, how he, on the longest and coldest nights, would tell stories by the fire, igniting the flame of imagination and memory in the villagers' hearts. He knew that the spirit needed food and warmth as much as the body. The next morning, with the pale sun barely rising over the icy horizon, Anya gathered the villagers. The cold was biting and relentless, but she refused to allow despair to defeat them. "Winter is long, my friends," she began, her voice clear and firm, resonating in the icy air, "and it tries to test us in every way it knows. But we are the people of Yakutia. We are made of ice and fire, of patience and unwavering courage." She looked at each face, seeking to awaken the flame she knew existed in each of them. "We cannot let the darkness steal our joy of living, the inner flame that defines us. We must remember who we are, where we came from, the stories that shaped us." She proposed something simple, something Boris loved, and that was part of ancestral tradition, nights of storytelling, ancient songs, and sharing memories by the fire. At first, there was a palpable hesitation, a heavy silence, but Dima, with a smile that lit up his tired face, was the first to stand and began to narrate a funny adventure from his youth, eliciting laughter. The elder woman, with her melodious and soft voice, intoned an ancient song of hope. Slowly, the communal tent filled with a different kind of warmth, not just from the crackling fire, but from the human connection that was rekindling. Anya watched, a genuine and relieved smile blooming on her lips. She had found a new way to fight, not with cunning against beasts, but with the warm flame of memory and unity against the cold that tried to freeze their spirits. Winter was still long and cruel, but the village had found a new weapon, an inner strength, shared joy and hope. The shared joy and hope, kindled during the storytelling nights, acted as a temporary balm for the village's weary spirits. In the days that followed, the communal tent remained a refuge of warmth and laughter, where voices rose in song and Boris's memories were lovingly celebrated. The children, once silent, returned to play, their laughter echoing softly among the tents. A precious sound Anya hadn't heard for weeks. Dima, with renewed vigor, led the hunting expeditions, and even if the returns were often modest, the sharing of the few resources was done with a spirit of unity that had once seemed lost. The elder woman, with her quiet wisdom, continued to guide the women in daily chores, transforming arduous tasks into moments of camaraderie. Anya observed everything with a lighter heart. She no longer needed to carry the world alone. The burden was now a web of intertwined hands, and each knot strengthened everyone. However, Yakutia, in its cruel magnificence, allowed no long truces. Winter deepened, and with it a new threat, silent and insidious, began to manifest. It wasn't hunger, for the herd, though precious, still provided essential sustenance. It was the lack of light, the almost perpetual darkness that stretched for days, weeks on end, stealing vitality, color, and clarity of mind. The melancholy which Anya thought she had driven away with stories returned, but in a more subtle, more ingrained way. The villagers began to suffer from chronic fatigue, not just physical, but mental. Small disagreements arose more frequently, patience waned, and their gazes, once full of renewed hope, began to cloud with a weariness that seemed to come from the very soul. Anya noticed the change. The hunters returned more irritable. Mothers had difficulty calming their children, and even the elder woman in her quiet moments seemed more distant. One afternoon, while helping to sort furs, she saw Dima argue harshly with a young hunter over a trivial matter of task division. The tone, the harshness, were unusual for Dima, always so thoughtful. Anya intervened gently, reminding them of the importance of cooperation. The argument ceased, but the unease persisted. That night, the communal fire, which once teemed with life, now burned with a weaker glow, and conversations were sparse, punctuated by long silences. "What is happening to us, Anya?" asked a young mother, her voice a whisper of despair. "The stories gave us strength, but now I feel the darkness is swallowing us again." Anya felt a knot in her throat. She had faced wolves and the pain of grief, but how to combat the absence of light, the very essence of winter that corroded the joy of living? The elder woman, sitting as always beside Anya, touched her hand. "It's the sickness of darkness, my daughter," she said, her eyes wise and sad. "When the sun hides for too long, the soul shrinks. We need light, not just in our hearts, but in our eyes." Anya understood. It wasn't just hope that needed to be fed, but the very perception of reality, the ability to see beyond the gloom. She remembered Boris, how he, in the harshest winters, would create small ice sculptures and illuminate them with reindeer fat, transforming them into sources of light and beauty, a reminder that beauty could be found even in the deepest darkness. It was a simple yet powerful gesture that brought a ray of hope and color to the monotonous and somber environment. The next morning, Anya gathered Dima and some of the younger hunters. "We need ice," she said, her eyes gleaming with a new idea. "Pure ice, transparent as crystal. And we need reindeer fat, a lot of it." They looked at her, confused, but the determination on her face was contagious. Anya explained her vision: to create ice lanterns, spread them throughout the village, light small fires at strategic points so that the light, even if artificial, could combat the darkness that consumed them. It was a collective effort, a new way to fight against winter, not just with strength, but with beauty and creativity. Dima, understanding the depth of the idea, nodded with a smile. "Boris would be proud, Anya. You are teaching us to see the light where before we only saw shadows." The village, once again, united in a common purpose, not to hunt or gather, but to create, to light the way. The village, once again, united in a common purpose, not to hunt or gather, but to create, to light the way. The following days were dedicated to a delicate and, in its own way, monumental task. Dima, with his strength and organization, led the men in search of pure ice blocks, transparent as crystal, on the shores of a nearby frozen lake. It was arduous work, in a cold that burned the skin, but Anya's vision, the promise of light, infused them with an energy that exhaustion couldn't completely extinguish. They carved the ice with rustic tools, shaping it into cylindrical or cubic forms, digging a space in the center for reindeer fat. Their hands, once accustomed to bows and knives, now moved with careful precision, guided by patience. The women, under the elder woman's gentle guidance, prepared the reindeer fat, melting it and weaving small wicks from dry moss fibers. Their fingers, agile at sewing furs, now worked to ensure each lantern had long-lasting fuel. The children, once apathetic, watched with curious eyes, some even helping to carry small pieces of ice or collect wicks, their childish laughter echoing again, albeit softly, in the icy air. Anya was everywhere, her eyes attentive, her words of encouragement, a balm against the cold and fatigue. She herself worked tirelessly, her hands cracked by the ice, but her spirit warmed by the vision materializing. There were moments of frustration. Ice blocks that broke, wicks that wouldn't light, exhaustion threatening to steal their newfound vigor. But with each obstacle, the memory of the greater purpose, to combat the sickness of darkness, propelled them forward. Dima, seeing a young hunter give up on a stubborn block, sat beside him, not with reprimand, but with a smile. "Light is not born without effort, my young one," he said. And together, with renewed patience, they managed to shape the ice. The elder woman, in turn, told stories of how the ancestors used light to ward off the spirits of melancholy, reinforcing the importance of that work. Finally, after days of joint effort, hundreds of ice lanterns were ready. Small fires were prepared at strategic points, their stone beds ready to receive the flame. The darkest night of the month approached, and with it, the anxiety of knowing if the effort would be enough. The villagers gathered, their faces marked by expectation, hope, and fear mingled in their gazes. Anya felt her heart pound, a mixture of apprehension and unwavering faith. It was time. With a solemn gesture, Anya lit the first wick. The small flame flickering within the translucent ice. The light, soft and golden, burst forth, transforming the opaque ice into a shimmering beacon. Dima and the elder woman, with steady hands, lit the next ones, and then, one by one, the villagers followed, spreading throughout the village. Within minutes, the darkness that had seemed to swallow everything was pushed back by a constellation of flickering lights. The village, once a point of gloom, transformed into an oasis of brightness and warmth. The ice walls of the tents glowed, the paths lit up, and the small fires added a reddish warmth to the spectacle. A murmur of admiration swept through the crowd, followed by sighs of relief, and finally, tears. They weren't tears of sadness, but of deep emotion, of a rebirth. Their faces, once pale and distant, were now illuminated, not just by the light of the lanterns, but by an inner glow that seemed to have been rekindled. The children pointed at the lights, their eyes wide with wonder, and their laughter, now strong and spontaneous, echoed through the night. The sickness of darkness seemed to retreat before that explosion of beauty and hope. Anya watched the scene, her heart overflowing. She saw Dima smile at the elder woman, a genuine smile of pure joy. She saw mothers embrace their children, their eyes full of silent gratitude. She hadn't hunted a colossal buffalo, nor confronted a wolf leader with brute force, but she had ignited an even more vital flame, the flame of hope and beauty in the hearts of her people. Boris's spirit, she knew, was there, in every ray of light, in every smile. Winter was still long and merciless, but the village had found a way to fight against the darkness, not just surviving, but flourishing amidst the ice. Winter was still long and merciless, but the village had found a way to fight against the darkness, not just surviving, but flourishing amidst the ice. The constellation of flickering lights, which the previous night had pushed back the gloom, remained as a silent testament to their newfound strength. The next morning, the pale sun barely dared to peek out, but the village didn't wake with the same heaviness as before. A murmur of lighter voices, the clinking of tools, and the occasional laughter of children replaced the oppressive silence. The ice lanterns, though extinguished by the faint daylight, were visible reminders of the beauty they had created. Anya observed the change with a peaceful heart. She saw Dima and the hunters, with renewed vigor, begin to prepare the ice blocks for the next night, not as an arduous task, but as an essential ritual. The women, under the elder woman's guidance, wove new wicks and prepared more reindeer fat, chatting and laughing as they worked, their agile fingers moving with a purpose that went beyond mere subsistence. The sickness of darkness didn't completely disappear, but its poison was diluted by light and unity. Tired gazes gave way to eyes that, though still marked by the cold, shone with a more lasting hope. The nights became the highlight of the day. When the lanterns were lit again, the village transformed into a stage for tales and songs. Dima, once focused only on hunting, discovered a talent for mimicry, eliciting laughter from the villagers with his imitations of forest animals. The elder woman, with her soft voice, not only told stories of ancestors, but also taught the children to create small snow and ice sculptures, which were then illuminated, adding even more sparkle to the landscape. Each family, inspired, began to decorate their own tents with small, light arrangements, transforming the interior into warm and inviting refuges. Anya, sitting by the fire, felt Boris's spirit present not as a painful absence, but as a living inspiration. He would have loved how his people had found a way to fight against melancholy, not with strength, but with art and community. She realized that true leadership wasn't just about guiding in times of crisis, but nurturing joy, creativity, and human connection so they could flourish even in the most adverse conditions. The conflict of hopelessness wasn't overcome by a single heroic action, but by a series of small and constant acts of love, beauty, and collective resilience. Weeks turned into months. Winter remained merciless, with its icy temperatures and prolonged darkness. However, the village had changed. The chronic fatigue and irritability that once threatened to corrode their bonds were replaced by a serene acceptance of challenges and an unwavering determination to find beauty in each day. The villagers learned to value every ray of light, every shared laugh, every story told. They had discovered that the light that mattered most didn't come from the sun, but from within themselves. Fueled by the warmth of community, Anya, Dima, and the elder woman together formed the pulsating heart of this new village. They were not just leaders, but guardians of a flame that now burned in everyone. The village, once on the brink of despair, had transformed into a beacon of resilience, a living testament that even in Yakutia's merciless vastness, the human spirit could not only survive, but flourish, finding light in darkness and joy in unity. Winter hadn't ended yet, but the village was ready. They had resolved the deepest conflict, the threat of losing themselves to the cold and darkness. They had found the light. The village had indeed found the light, not merely in the flickering glow of the ice lanterns, but in the inextinguishable flame within each heart. Weeks stretched on, and winter, though still relentless, no longer held the same power as before. Temperatures continued to plummet to frightening levels, and snow covered the landscape in an infinite white mantle. But melancholy had been banished, replaced by a serene resilience and a quiet joy that permeated every tent, every conversation. Murmurs of despair were replaced by more frequent laughter and the soft melody of songs that now sprang spontaneously. Anya observed her villagers with a profound sense of gratitude and admiration. Dima, with his contagious energy, not only led the hunts and maintained the lanterns, ensuring the light never extinguished, but also organized games and friendly competitions among the young and adults, transforming the arduous routine into moments of fun and unity. He told jokes, encouraged the shyest, and by his own example showed that strength lay not just in muscles, but in the ability to keep one's spirit light. The children, once apathetic, were now true masters in the art of ice sculpting, creating small wonders that adorned the tent entrances, each a beacon of creativity and hope. Their eyes shone with the innocence and wonder of those rediscovering beauty in a world that once seemed grey. The elder woman, with her ancestral wisdom, wove stories not just to entertain, but to teach, transmitting her people's legacy and the invaluable importance of staying connected to the land and to each other, reinforcing the bonds that united them. Anya, in turn, felt a peace she hadn't known for a long time. The pain of grief for Boris hadn't disappeared, but had transformed into a sweet and inspiring memory, a constant warmth in her chest. She saw his smile in every lit lantern, heard his voice in the songs echoing through the village, felt his presence in her people's renewed strength. He was no longer physically there, but his essence lived in the spirit of unity and courage she had helped rekindle. She had overcome the paralysis of fear, the anguish of overwhelming responsibility, and the insidious sickness of darkness that threatened to steal their souls. Her journey, which began with hopelessness before 1,000 hungry wolves, now culminated in the understanding that her people's greatest strength lay not in hunting or protecting the herd, but in the ability to nourish the soul, to find beauty and hope even in the most brutal and desolate conditions. Finally, after months of almost total darkness, a subtle, yet unmistakable sign began to emerge on the horizon. The hours of pale light stretched a little longer each day, and the sun, though still weak and distant, seemed to shine with a renewed promise, a gentle invitation to the life that awaited. It was the dawn, the promise that winter, however long and cruel, would eventually give way to spring. The villagers felt the change in the air, a collective relief that manifested in wider smiles, lighter steps, and a new enthusiasm for daily chores. They gathered in the communal tent, no longer to ward off melancholy, but to celebrate life, unbreakable resilience, and the imminent arrival of a new cycle of abundance and light. Anya stood up, her eyes sweeping over each face illuminated by the fire's flames and the warm glow of the ice lanterns. "Winter tested us in ways we never imagined," she said, her voice choked with emotion yet firm. "But we overcame it, not with brute force, not with weapons, but with the strength of our hearts, of our unwavering unity, of our faith in each other." She paused, a genuine and radiant smile gracing her lips. "We learned that true light comes not just from the sun, but from within ourselves, from our capacity to love, to care for each other, to find beauty and hope even in the deepest and coldest darkness." The village, a beacon of hope in Yakutia's icy vastness, had proven that the human spirit, when nourished by compassion, creativity and courage, is indomitable. Anya, the widow who refused to yield to despair, had become the pulsating heart of her people, a living symbol that even with a broken heart and amidst the most extreme adversities, life always finds a way to flourish, to renew itself, to shine. Winter, which once threatened to steal everything, had paradoxically revealed to them the brightest light of all, the light of humanity itself, eternal and inextinguishable, a promise that the future would always bring a new dawn. The dawn Anya had foretold finally unfolded over Yakutia. It wasn't a sudden transformation, but a gentle transition, like the blooming of an ice flower. Each day the sun dared to linger a little longer, painting the horizon with long-forgotten shades of pink and gold. The snow, once oppressive, began to recede, revealing the damp earth, a clear sign of dormant life. The air, still biting, carried a different freshness, a promise of renewal. The village now was a beacon of activity and joy. The ice lanterns, having fulfilled their purpose with beauty, began to melt, their forms dissolving, but the light they had kindled in the villagers' hearts remained. The children, free from apathy, ran and played in the diminishing snow, their laughter echoing with vitality. Dima, with his contagious smile, led the preparations for the spring expeditions, planning the hunt and gathering with deepened wisdom. He was a compassionate leader, a brother to all. The elder woman sitting at her tent's entrance observed everything with a sparkle in her eyes. Her stories, once a refuge against darkness, now celebrated the life, strength, and unity of the people. She taught the young women to recognize the first sprouts, to prepare spring herbs, transmitting not only knowledge, but the unwavering certainty that life always finds a way, even after the harshest winter. Anya, amidst all this, felt a profound transformation. The pain of grief for Boris had transmuted into serene strength, silent gratitude. She no longer saw him as an absence, but as a constant presence, an echo of love and courage in every act of the people. His memories were not a burden, but a legacy, a guide. She had understood that true love doesn't end with death, but reinvents itself, spreads, becoming the foundation of the community. The village, which one day trembled before 1,000 hungry wolves and succumbed to the sickness of darkness, had emerged stronger and more united. They learned that true wealth lay not just in the herd, but in the web of human bonds, in the ability to find beauty in adversity and to light their own way when the outside world grew dark. Anya walked to the lake's edge, where the ice began to crack, revealing the dark water. She touched the cold surface, feeling the promise of life flowing. Winter had been a cruel but fair teacher. It had stripped them of everything but the essentials: faith, hope, and love for one another. With these treasures, they rebuilt not just their lives, but their souls. She turned to the village, vibrant under the rising sun. Every tent, face, laugh was a testament to the unbreakable resilience of the human spirit. Anya, the widow who refused to yield, had become the beacon, the pulsating heart of her people. Her courage was not that of a warrior, but that of a guardian of hope, a weaver of dreams amidst the ice. The future stretched before them, not without challenges, but with the certainty that together they could face any storm. Yakutia, in its merciless vastness, had witnessed the triumph of humanity, proof that, even in the most brutal conditions, love and unity can transform the deepest darkness into an eternal dawn. Life, after all, always finds a way to flourish, to renew itself, to shine, guided by the light that ignites in the innermost being.